as the Health Department recommends extending the ECQ and the NCR plus bubble to slow down the surge of new cases. But how can government's pandemic response get back on track? We discuss in this episode of the Chiefs. Welcome to this Tuesday edition of the Chiefs. With us, of course, tonight are Robbie Alampay of News 5, of One News, and Ana Marie Pamintuan of the Philippine Star. Ami and Robbie, well, happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. Evening.
Is it happier today?
Hindi. Well, bumaba na konti ng 10,000, ano? So,
Yes,
medyo
yes,
medyo nabawasan, no?
Yeah, tsaka parang let's start yung mga glass half full. Octa Research is also saying na mukhang may kumakagat naman, di ba? They're saying, sabi nila yung worst case prediction nila, forecast nila dati for middle of April, it shouldn't hit 18,000 anymore. They're now looking at a worst case scenario of I think 13,000.
13,000, yes. So we're gonna be happy with 13.
But on the other hand,
all things considered,
on the other hand, ang gusto daw ng Department of Health one more week of ECQ. Para daw maramdaman ng gusto yung, siguro yung encouraging news na yan, ang nagkaano rin sa DOH na haba-habaan pa natin tong ECQ. So siguro, kailangan malaman natin what our business community thinks about it, ano?
Yeah, I can smell your segue coming in.
Yeah. Pero Ami, bago naka-ready na yung segue, no? Pero bago that, another quick qualifier on the data. Something that we should also brace for, because now they said they're going to start counting antigen results, because before RT-PCR lang yung binibilang. But once they start counting antigen, everybody is now flagging na we might see higher numbers as well. It's just something to keep into context. Kung biglang tumaas ulit yung mga numbers, it gives us a more accurate picture, but also means tataas yung numero.
Yeah, because you would have more tests to record and to consider. As well, dagdag ko na, ang sabi ng Octa, you might see an artificial drop in numbers sometime early next week because of the Holy Week weekend. Magsasara yung mga testing centers for 3 days.
Kaya nga hinihingi nga ng DOH, although ang sabi ni Harry Roque nga, a longer ECQ will be the absolute last resort. So, although sinasabi nila din dati na hindi tayo magla-lockdown, and here we are. So, tanongin na natin.
Okay, let's go back to Ami's Let's go back to Ami's segue.
Yeah, tanongin natin kung anong reaction dyan ng business community.
Okay, we have with us tonight our first guest, former Ambassador Benedicto Yujuico of the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Ambassador Yujuico, maraming salamat po and welcome back to the Chiefs.
Good evening,
Thank you.
Ambassador.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Amy, Robbie.
Yes, sir. Sir, we suppose you... yes, sir. Thank you for coming back. We suppose you were listening last night when the President announced that the private sector would be allowed to finally import vaccines at will. However, merong qualifier kanina. Si Secretary Galvez, I don't know if you call it a qualifier or a reversal. Ang sinabi kanina is you're back to tripartite, hindi po unilaterals ang papayagan, which appears to be contradictory to what the President said. But anyway, my question is, where does that leave your proposal? What happens next to your proposal for unilateral importation of COVID-19 vaccines?
Okay, when I heard the President order Secretary Galvez to sign any and all documents to allow private sector to import at will, maski ilan ang gusto nila, you know, I know that we have to wait a little bit because that will have to be interpreted.
Translated.
And so we were not surprised when, in fact, si Secretary Galvez clarified the position a little bit because, in fact, there is a law, yung RA 11525.
Yes, sir.
Which specifies na bawal ang private sector. So it's under it has to be, we have to follow government.
Yes, sir.
Pero
I
ang
think you're trying
problema
to
so
say
far
but just to
is
clarify,
meron ngang law,
yeah.
pero walang IRR. So, there's a source of confusion. Hindi nila pinapaliwanag ano pa talaga yung guidelines para doon sa RA 11525.
But sir, given na walang IRR and at the same time you are mindful of what the law says, would an IRR potentially be enough to clarify what needs to be clarified?
Or
Well, no,
even
it's
reverse.
not it's not just a clarification. It's a matter of indemnity as well. For example, yung indemnity, only government can actually give that, not private sector. And so, kailangan pa rin ang government participation. Hindi pwedeng private sector alone will do what they want, import, and then issue a indemnity. Nobody will agree to that. So we have to work within the framework. And kailangan ipaliwanag lang ni Secretary Galvez at i-publish na yung IRR. In fact, I wrote him a letter. That is what I did after I heard the President make the pronouncement.
So, gaano katagal daw before the IRR can come out? Kasi parang ang tingin ng mga tao ngayon, akala nila, nagkakaroon ng red tape because of the tripartite. Is that an accurate perception? Wala pa palang IRR.
Wala. Well, si Ricky Razon, for example, has been negotiating directly. Maski si Joey Concepcion has been negotiating directly. And even the Ayala Group nag-negotiate. And we ourselves try. Pero hindi pwedeng case-to-case basis. Masyadong matagal. Ang maganda sana, the IRR provides very specific provisions under which the government will allow approval of the vaccines. For example, sasabihin nila, one, only those that have been approved by the FDA and have been issued a EUA can be imported. So ayun, di maliwanag yun. Di ba? So they have to issue what are the guidelines, so everybody can actually just follow the guidelines, and pag sinabit sila yung complete paperwork, then they should react and they should approve or disapprove immediately. Hindi pwede yung after 3 or 4 weeks wala pang nangyayari. No, that's
but sir, with the president saying okay, hayaan na to purchase at will, and at the same time the quick clarification na hindi kailangan pa rin magdaan sa tripartite. Bottom line, did anything fundamentally change from the other day to yesterday?
Yes, malaki, Robbie. I think yung IATF and si Secretary Galvez and other officials now understand that there is urgency here. This is not something that we can wait another 2 weeks while we are studying the legal documents given to us by the supplier, kung pipirmahan natin yung undertaking. Wala, hindi pwede yun. People are dying. You have to be a genius. You know how I know na masyado na itong COVID? Everybody, and I'm sure you at least know someone who have died of COVID. Hindi na yung sa periodiko lang nababasa na so-and-so died of COVID and so on. Now, we have friends we know who are dying of COVID. We have friends who know are having difficulty entering emergency room because punong-puno na. I don't want to sound like I am scaring people, no? Pero the reality is we have to act right away. This is an emergency. This is not like, let's take time to review the documentation because importante maintindihan natin ano yung indemnity agreement. No, this is a matter of life and death. Yung indemnity agreement, pirmahan mo na lang yon. It's like if you have a parent in the emergency room, the doctor says, to save your father or mother, we have to do this. Ano ba yun? Tatawag ka ng abogado, papakita mo muna yung papel, tapos sabihin mo sa doktor, paaral ko muna. Hindi, you have to make a decision right there and then. So maybe I'm exaggerating the analogy, but there is extreme urgency in this case. And I think people are understanding this a lot better now.
Sir, let me read to you Section 5 of RA 525, which relates to what we're talking about right now. It's the procurement and administration of the vaccines by private entities. So private entities may buy the vaccines only in cooperation with the DOH and the NTF through a multi-party agreement. Now with that in mind, kasi nga it is specified in the law that tripartite is
Yes.
required. What proposal do we have to make this smoother, to sabi niyo nga kanina, finally meron ng sense of urgency. Pero how do you propose that this be translated into actual action?
Actually, I told you earlier that I wrote to Secretary Galvez, no? My letter was very short and simple. I told him, you tell us what private sector needs to do to get your endorsement and approval. Ikaw na magsabi. Hindi na kami ang magsasabi kung anong gusto namin. You tell us. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Susundin namin yan because we want to help. We want to get the vaccines here. We are not gonna dictate what we think is... No, you tell us. Basta sabihin mo. Kasi pag hindi namin alam kung exactly what you want, we will not be able
Yung
to
parameters.
do anything. Oo.
Ambassador,
Sino nga magsabi?
Ambassador, yung private sector ba, are you willing to donate half of all your procurements to the government? Kasi yun din yung original na tripartite nila Joey, no, sa kanila, no?
Yeah.
Nila Ricky Rason. Are you willing to do that as well?
Well, frankly, hindi ako sumama ron sa advocacy na yon because hindi ko I couldn't rationalize it in myself na yung kalahati bibigay sa government tapos yung kalahati na ibibigay sa private sector, ang government pa din ang magpa-prioritize, no? Only huge companies can afford to do that, if at all. So ang PCCI did not participate there. Why? Ang PCCI, 99% of our membership are MSMEs. Wala na nga pansweldo yung mga small and medium size. Anong sasabihin ko sa kanila? Kayo na magbayad, pagkatapos kayong kalahati ipapamigay pa natin. I couldn't get myself to tell them or endorse yung program na yan. And in fact, that was one of the things that delayed and confused. Tamo, eventually, pumayag na rin sila. Sana right from the very start, wala nang ganong kondisyon, we would have been 2 months ahead already of where we are today.
What do you mean pumayag sila? So, wala na yung requirement na yon ngayon? Under the tripartite?
Wala na yun.
Wala na yon.
Wala na yun. Wala na yun.
So kung
Ambassador,
Sana, right from the very start, wala yun. Para hindi nagsayang ng panahon. Kasi it is time. We are fighting for time. Parang may gera dito eh. And the whole thing is like this. I want to explain to you. You know, we are in a boat. And lahat ng Pilipino nandun sa boat. And we are caught in a storm. So hindi dapat tayo nagtuturuan, nagsisisihan, kasi lulubog tayo eh. We have to just make a plan, agree on a plan, execute, and that is the best way we can save ourselves.
Ambassador, this is by way of managing my expectations and I think the expectations of a lot of people. Kasi pagka sinabi natin, let the private sector purchase, then people automatically think maybe it's a matter of funds and the funds can unlock a lot of things. And then when we talk about IRR, they also recognize it's also a function of red tape, it's also a function of regulations and so on. But we also know that it's also a function of supply and the fact that manufacturers are dealing with governments and we're lining up behind governments and countries and so on. Let's assume everything is in place. The funds and all the regulations you need so that it's clear. Once everything is in place, how much faster does the private sector participation actually make the process?
Robbie, you hit the nail on the head. If we did this 2 months ago, we would have had deliveries already. If I went to India now and I talked to Bharat Biotech, for example, one of the major suppliers, they will tell me probably wait 2 months or 3 months. We have lost time, double, no? While we are discussing here, pagkatapos yung delivery date. And in fact, India actually is stopping their export of the vaccine. They want to take care of themselves first, no? So mahirap. I'm not saying it's gonna be a walk in the park. Pag meron tayong approval, may pera tayo, punta tayo doon, tapos 1 week later, nandiyan na yung vaccine. Hindi ganon. We will have to pay the penalty of acting late. That means yung later delivery as well.
In the meantime, Ambassador, mabagal yung vaccine rollout natin, kulang na supply, and here comes the variant and the surge in COVID cases. Ang sabi ng DOH, they're recommending another week of ECQ in the NCR+. Ano po ang sentimiento dito ng business community?
Well, ang sana gusto rin naming madinig, business community wants to hear other action plans by the Department of Health. For example, we want to know anong gagawin nila about testing. Because nasa cornerstone solution ang testing. Mas kung mag-lockdown lang tayo ng mag-lockdown pero ang testing natin is way behind, then we are not gonna get anywhere. Ngayon, sinasabi ng Department of Health na currently ang kanilang run rate sa testing 50,000, no? Iaakyat daw nila yan sa 100,000. O sige, bantayan natin yan. I want to see, no? Binabantayan namin yan sa private sector.
So kung mararampa
Yan ang sinabi mo, okay yan. Pero tignan natin kung magagawa nyo.
80,000 daw to 90,000 a day, okay na yun sa inyo. Yun ang sabi ni Vince Dizon, yun yung target. So kung mairarampa natin, okay lang. Na mag-isip.
Actually, 100,000 is better than 50,000. Or 50,000 is better than 10,000. That's how I say it. Pero, you know, it's never enough. Pero it's a good start. Kung maabot natin yung 50 talaga, okay na yun Pagkatapos yung 100. Tapos, kailangan samahan natin ang system yan. Hindi yung basta, sige, mag-testing tayo dito, mag-testing. We have to have very intelligent approach. Hanapin nasaan na yung community quarantine. Doon tayo pupunta yung mga areas that are specifically affected. And we have to have that as well. We have to have that knowledge saan tayo magte-test. There are many others na pwede natin gawin, Amy. No? So, it's not just, sige, mag-lockdown na lang tayo. Hindi. Business sector wants to see, okay, let's see the testing. Let's see the tracing. No? And let's see the other factors that the other countries have done to make their program very successful, like Vietnam, no? Thailand. You know, we are way far from what these guys have been able to accomplish. Bakit? Because marami silang vaccine? No. It's not a matter of vaccine even. Because early on, they closed their borders very tight. Number two, yung kanilang testing immediately. Tapos yung quarantine procedures nila, technologically based. So, Vietnam and Taiwan, they're very good. Of course, meron silang experience dealing with SARS. Kasi yung healthcare nila lumakas because dumaan sila doon sa problema ng SARS. So that's another factor which we did not encounter, yung SARS. So mas hindi tayo prepared compared to them.
Okay.
So, ano ba ito? Malungkot ba yung sinasabi ko? Tumawa naman kayo. You have to smile a little bit.
Sir, pero sige sir, moving forward, okay. With what Secretary Galvez said kanina, to qualify or clarify, is the private sector moving in the direction of acquiring vaccines? I mean, in terms of timetables, what are we looking at from the private sector?
Okay. Meron na. For example, yung Unilab, they are, of course, not only a pharmaceutical company, they are a logistics company. They do have vaccine. I believe that they have been approved to import the vaccine. So, Zuilig, for example, ganun din. They have the logistics. They're a pharmaceutical company. And Ayala, they have Healthway. So, umaandar na yung private sector. In fact, private sector has been unusually cooperative with each other. Merong meeting nga, I think it was Sunday, yung major associations of the private sector banding together. Yung MAP, PCCI, Makati Business Club, Phoenix, lahat yan. Pag Sunday, mapagsama-sama mo at mag-usapan tungkol sa problema, that means talagang malaking problema because a lot of them actually have something else to do. Pero private sector, what I can tell you is cooperating very much with each other to help the government. Yun lang naman ang gusto namin. We stand ready to help. Government should tell us, this is how you can help and we are going to do it.
Ambassador, beyond yung usapin ng mga vaccines, we've already discussed that. But as you said, the majority of your members are MSMEs. This was sort of not what they were expecting. We were talking about by Holy Week, but here we are now, another lockdown, and it's still a lot of uncertainty kung gaano katagal itong stricter ano. Ano po ang prognosis nyo, and what do you say to your members now?
Well, alam mo, ang aming primary concern really is not even just the business. Yung mga employee ng MSMEs, wala na silang trabaho. Pag walang trabaho, alam niyo naman, walang sweldo. Walang sweldo, walang pambili ng pagkain. Walang pambili ng pagkain, gutom. So, hindi ka man mamatay sa COVID, mamatay ka rin ng gutom. So, we are telling our membership, tinutulungan namin silang umutang sa bangko through SB Corporation, PCCI. Actually, I hired ex-bankers to help our members to even negotiate for new loans. So we're doing everything that we can. Pero isang taon na ito, Robbie, So we are scraping bottom. But we haven't given up. Because if we give up, we will have millions, literally, I'm not exaggerating, millions of people that will go hungry. I hope atong lockdown na natin, or bubble as they call it, will not be extended for long because not because of anything else, but because our people are getting hungry. Our people are begging in the streets. They don't have anywhere to go. Government says merong ayuda, 1,000 pesos per person, about 4,000 per family. April pa yun wala namang specific date sa April. Alam mo yung ating empleyado, there's a saying in Tagalog, yung tuka, kain, or kain tuka. In other words, every day, naghahanap ng pera para merong makain. So hindi pwedeng mag-intay ng 1 week or 2 weeks yung mga yan. That's what I'm saying. It's really urgent that we act and we provide assistance to our employees.
Ambassador,
that's kind of the message.
Ambassador, you're bringing in Covaxin, of Bharat. Meron na ba siyang EUA? Kasi ang parang pagkaintindi namin,
wala pa. Ang Bharat, wala pa. Wala pa siyang EUA.
How many doses are you planning to bring in? Kung sakasakali makuha na EUA, tapos yung tripartite, parang ang dami-dami pang gagawin, How many doses are you planning to bring in?
Yeah. Amy, let me just tell you yung structure ng PCCI,
Yes.
We are, of course, nationwide. We have about 35,000 members. Tapos may mga empleyado sila. Tapos we have 120 industry affiliates. Lahat na yan, it will require millions. So, hindi namin, PCCI cannot by itself manage all of that. PCCI will actually, ito yung aming action plan. I'll tell you, we have a plan though. As soon as we get very clear guidelines from Secretary Galvez, we will send immediately a circular to our members. Sige, we are going to now import, lumista kayo, because we are putting together a purchase plan. And from there, we will be telling them kung kailan darating and so on and so forth. I will find a way para matulungan sila to finance. Alam mo, PCCI is a non-profit organization. Pero we'll find a way. We'll find a way para somehow makatulong makapagdating ng vaccine, because that is our long-term solution for people to get injected.
Ambassador, I was really intrigued and interested dun po sa sinabi niyo na tinatawagan niyo yung ibang mga kilala niyo na retired bankers to help these small businesses also to apply for loans, maybe to restructure some loans. I'm just wondering whether the data is there or quite anecdotal. What's the temperature check on the banks? When you approach them, when you hold the hands of these small businessmen and go to the banks and tell them, Adre, pare-pareho naman tayo nagkakaintindihan, but on the other side of it, pare-pareho rin tayong sumasakit. What do the banks say?
Well, the banks say meron din kaming problema, pare. Kasi pag hindi kami, for example, nabayaran, let's say you ask for too much, yung pushing back of the payment of interest, sabi nila, they have their own cash flow problems to worry about, etc., etc. So it's a matter of just working with them. Meron tayong SB Corporation under the DTI. Yun, make arrangement kami na, pwede ba magpautang kayo 500,000 pesos, walang collateral, pero PCCI will endorse. Will not guarantee, will endorse. At sana mabilis lang yung releases, no? So they have 8 to 10 billion na pwedeng kunin. So these are the things that other branches of government can implement, no? But even 8, 10, 20 billion is not enough, Robbie. No? I mean, that's a drop in the bucket. This is a problem. And you know, sa Amerika nga, yung kanilang stimulus package doon, 1.9 trillion. Trillion yan. Oh. So, and tayo, we have the smallest, konti yung ating binibigay sa business. So, compared to other countries, no? So, anyway, I don't wanna go there. I'm just saying.
We'll save it for another. We'll save it for another. It'll have to be for another episode, sir.
Yeah, another episode. We have to help our disadvantaged. Yun talaga. That should be top of the mind. We should help them out because hirap na talaga sila. You know, I receive calls from all over the Philippines. Ako, wala pang lunchtime, masakit na ang ulo ko. A lot of them are really complaining already.
Okay. Ambassador Benedicto Yujuico, the President of the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Sir, maraming salamat for joining us tonight.
Thank you,
Ingat po kayo.
Ambassador.
Salamat po.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Ingat po. We'll just go into a break, so please stay with us.
Welcome back to the Chiefs. You're now in the final stage of our conversation. Now joining us is Dr. Annalisa Ong Lim of the Health Professionals Alliance Against COVID-19, or HPA. She is also a member of the IATF Technical Working Group on COVID Bias and the DOH Technical Advisory Group. Good evening, Dr. Ong Lim.
Good evening.
Good evening again.
Ma'am, kanina pinag-uusapan namin kasi everybody's trying to manage expectations, let's say. Diba? On the one hand, we did have some hopeful news from Okta. Sabi nila, mukhang kumakagat naman yung restrictions natin. They're revising their forecast downwards for the middle of April. At the same time, they're also saying, baka magkaroon ng artificial spike in numbers, baka magka-artificial na bumaba rin ang numbers. And now with the antigen test now going to be counted, kanina I was speaking with General Padilla, he was also saying we might have to expect na tumaas din ng konti ang numbers. Maybe yun lang po. I want to start with that. Put us in the proper framing for the numbers that we're expecting after Holy Week.
We don't really expect that the number of cases will significantly change until 2 weeks down the line coming from these restrictions because based on the behavior of this disease, whatever you do now takes about 2 weeks to play out in terms of infection and disease presentation. So realistically, the interventions we're doing now happening at the end of March will probably be seen by the middle of April. Now, even so, no, it's very important to continue with the interventions because if we don't, then we can only expect the numbers to become even worse because we're not doing anything to address the problem.
Well, in the meantime, DOH nga is proposing a longer, one more week of ECQ sa NCR+. Ano pong tingin ninyo dito sa proposal na to? Kasi, of course, the business community doesn't want it. Saka, pero yung mga OPA, they have been proposing a 2-week lockdown actually.
Yes, so the wording in the original resolution was actually minimum of 1 week. So for me, that means that there's the option to increase the duration as necessary. Now, from the infectious disease perspective, it makes sense actually to target a 2-week interval because, as I said, diba, that's the behavior of this infection. And what do you expect to happen kung isang linggo lang yung inimpose natin? But I guess, no, we always just want to be very agile, no, in terms of our intervention so that if there is an improvement that shows something that's significant and can be responded to, then why not, diba?
Mhm. Pero ma'am, is there any chance that whatever will follow this week's ECQ could possibly be a more liberal ECQ? I mean, I know as it is right now, the ECQ we have is liberal compared to last year's ECQ.
Yes.
But there are those kasi who are playing with the idea na oh yes, what if we extend the ECQ for one more week pero with a little bit more loosening of the restrictions? Would that make sense?
Ed, actually, we came from that already. Nung nagra-rise yung mga numbers, there were already communications being sent to the different LGUs, informing them that the numbers are rising, please do this, please do that. And I guess it's really just very difficult to get people into the mindset of we need for your movements to be restricted unless there's a declaration of some kind of a lockdown, diba?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So your preference, if I may ask, your preference is an extension of the ECQ as it is already. Kasi to further loosen the restrictions would I suppose defeat the purpose.
So this is a personal reaction. Yes, it's my personal preference that sana ma-extend kasi parang mas magkakaroon ng magandang impact kung mabigyan natin ng 2 weeks.
Parang sulit, di ba? Parang sulit. Kung hindi, parang sayang lang yung 1 week.
Yes.
In the meantime, ma'am, I'm just curious your reaction to yung lumabas na mga surveys ngayon na ang baba pa rin ng vaccine confidence ng mga Pilipino. Nung unang bugso ng mga vaccination para sa mga health workers, there seemed to be hope certainly within the among the frontliners themselves. But ngayon parang yung numbers wala, hindi tumataas. I mean, what do you think is missing?
It's very hard to say, Robbie, kasi I do acknowledge, no, that there's been a lot of effort to try to communicate about vaccines, and this has been directed towards different sectors. So initially sa healthcare workers kasi sila yung target. Maybe we need to work on more focused communications. Like, for example, when the senior citizen category comes up, then maybe we can start talking to them also, or address their concerns, and then the comorbidities and so on. Para makita natin kung ano ba yung specific to that group, and we target what they need to know.
In the meantime, well, since we're talking about vaccines, you know that people are talking about the president's order last night na, well, it was clarified today that the private sector can now import vaccines at will. We understand this was opposed earlier by the Health Professionals Association, dahil baka daw mabago yung mga vaccine prioritization protocols. What do you think of this order of the president? Although binago siya ng konti, minodify na meron pa rin tripartite. But I think he is open now to liberalizing the rules for the importation by the private sector.
Well, there's so many considerations for that, no? And maybe the details have to be reviewed. First off, the vaccines are made available under an emergency use authorization, and the EUAs are only issued to the national government through the Department of Health. So even if we say that the private sector will be allowed to import, then they will still have to, at some point, be tied up to the national government. Otherwise, that EUA does not extend to them. And the reason why we want to do that, no, we want this EUA under the national government, is precisely because these vaccines are not licensed, because we need the accountability to fall within a particular group, so that if there are any issues, then the consumer is not left unprotected.
So you think dapat the old rules will still apply na tripartite, and yun na nga, since the government will be guaranteeing the indemnification, kailangan pa rin yung direct government participation in any procurement?
Yes, because this is actually the standard process for an EUA. So unless babaguhin yung EUA rules, I don't know how possible that will be na diretso na lang si private sector ang mag-a-acquire.
Actually, pati dun sa Republic Act 11525, yung vaccine procurement program law, di ba, it does specify there that required talaga yung tripartite agreement for any purchase by the private sector of vaccines. Pero may provision din dun that specifies that even if the vaccines are bought by the private sector, meron din siyang priority list starting off with the healthcare workers, senior citizens, economic frontliners, and essential workers. So even dun sa private sector, meron din siyang priority list ng vaccination na hindi basta-basta pwedeng pataubin.
That's right. So, Ed, ano naman talaga yon? In the existing tripartite agreements that some of the companies have already signed up for, that's very clearly stated. We want for the priority list to be followed. And this is not just because we want to protect certain groups. The whole point of the vaccination program is to achieve the goal efficiently. And if our goal is to decrease illness rate and death rate, then you want to target those at the highest risk of illness and death. Diba? We're not going to give this to children. Let's say pwede siya sa bata, diba? Would you give it to kids? Hindi kasi di naman maraming batang nagkakasakit, di naman sila yung unang naharap sa severe disease, hindi rin sila, by God's grace, di sila yung namamatay, diba? Pero sino ba yung kailangan matarget? Yung may edad, yung may comorbidities, yung may healthcare workers, and so on. Kaya ganoon yung allocation, not for anything, but really just to achieve the goal efficiently.
Pero there's also the time element, no? Kasi yun ang sinasabi ng private sector. They are not held back by requirements such as yung down payment. May mga procurement laws ang gobyerno na hindi na pinoproblema ng private sector. Kaya daw nila mag-down payment, they can pay immediately, ganon. Kaya mas mabilis kung sila yung magpo-procure at least for their workers. Anong tingin niyo sa ganong argument?
Well, that's certainly something that works in their favor. No? They have the resources,
The finances.
both the financial and the logistical resources to be able to run their programs very efficiently. And I guess once the time comes that it's their turn, then why not, di ba? Full blast. Pero hindi siguro at the expense, baka yun yung point, no? Hindi siguro at the expense of the groups that need to be prioritized. Ang problema kasi, even as we say na, o sige, iba naman yung gagamitin nilang pondo, iisa yung pool na pinagkukuhanan natin eh. Ilan lang ba ang supply ng bakuna sa mundo? So yun yung
Ma'am, how would you-
efforts natin.
Ma'am, how would you at this point characterize or categorize our concern for areas outside of the NCR? On the one hand, dumadami talaga yung cases, it's starting to spread outside of NCR, bumababa na yung proportion ng cases that is in the NCR. At the same time, we noted that tracing chief Ben Magalong was expressing some concern also because it seems as if outside of NCR, your capacity for contact tracing is much, much lower. What's our concern now for areas outside of the NCR plus?
Ang mangyayari, kung may nangyayari sa NCR, hindi malayong madamay yung mga karatig lugar. Kasi 'di ba our borders are so porous, and also because NCR is the gateway to so many other areas in the country, not being able to control the spread here is going to impact everywhere else. And in fact, that's what we saw eh, di ba? Nung nagsimula pa lang yung pandemic, saan ba nagkaroon? Dito lang naman, nagsimula. Tapos dahil hindi natin na-contain, nagkaroon ng spread, edi naapektuhan na yung buong bansa. So, unfortunately, we do really need to focus on getting this area controlled. Otherwise, we risk involving the rest of the country.
Kasi Presidente daw, maiyak-iyak na siya eh. Maiyak-iyak na daw siya and he's telling us we should brace for bleak months ahead. Saka para daw tayo, we're almost back to zero daw, sabi niya. Do you share this assessment of the pandemic and the government's response?
I can't afford to think that way. Diba? Can't afford to think that way. There is no option to fail because if we fail, ano mangyayari sa atin? Cannot afford to think that way. You have to keep on trying to figure this out and offer solutions.
But do you feel we're almost back to zero or nagkakaroon naman tayo ng progress in responding to the pandemic?
I think what we've learned is how to manage the disease better. Parang the chances of somebody dying now are significantly less compared to the chances that person had earlier in the game last year. So we know how to manage this effectively. The challenge is not to allow the healthcare system to be overwhelmed because even if we know what to do, if we're not able to do it for each and every person that comes in, then that knowledge is going to be useless.
Ma'am, along those lines, we had video kanina showing the situation in Santa Ana Hospital. It's a district hospital in Manila.
Yes.
Well, I don't know if it's a one-off or if it's something happening all throughout Metro Manila. Pero clearly, the video showed that there are COVID patients already already occupying tents outside the hospital. Ang init eh. Kita mo, nainitan sila eh. And some of them were lying down on lawn chairs or in wheelchairs. Again, I don't know if this is a one-off or if this is something that is already happening in most of the public hospitals. I'm just wondering where we head from here eh. Kasi as everybody's been saying the numbers are still gonna keep on going up and the hospitals are already overburdened. So actually,
So if I
I don't
may,
know.
yes,
Yes, ma'am.
if I may, the proportion of cases, the case mix has not really changed significantly. The majority of patients will still be mild and asymptomatic. then
Oh, yes, ma'am.
followed by the moderately ill, about 15%, and the 5% who are severe and critically ill. So if you have limited resources, then you manage your resources efficiently. You make sure that those who need hospital care end up in the hospital. So it's really what you would call triaging, no?
Triaging. Yes, ma'am.
And that has to be
Yes, ma'am. But yun nga, ma'am, I think that has been a consistent problem. I think that triaging has been a consistent problem in terms of implementation. Kasi nga,
yes.
for example, Dr. Negrano says that are occupied by mild to asymptomatic. I'm sorry, I think I got choppy. Uh,
Yes.
well, briefly, parang that seems to be a problem nga. The triaging implementation seems to be a bit inconsistent
Right.
and needs more enforcement, I suppose.
Yes. So, well, we also have to consider that, for example, if you were from a particular community and you heard that you needed to be brought to a TTMF or a quarantine facility because you were positive or you had mild disease, baka yung preference mo will be, magpapa-ospital na lang ako kasi mas sigurado ko dun sa care doon eh.
Yeah,
Mahirap yan
di ba?
tanggalin sa mga tao. Tsaka paano naman kung lumala ako, tsaka nyo pa ako itatakbo sa ospital?
It's human
Pero,
nature.
oo, di ba? Pero sana kung we can assure, no, our patients na, hindi, pagka dinala kita dito, makakatanggap ka ng magandang care, and kung may mangyari sa'yo, ako bahala maglipat sa'yo doon. Wouldn't that be parang a palatable option? So that was supposed to have been the design of the One Hospital Command.
Okay. Now, Doc, this is something that we keep asking every week, and we know it's a very complicated thing. But manpower, we know, is also a very big problem. Particularly, there's a shortage of nurses. A lot of LGUs have said they have emergency hiring programs in place, pero hindi talaga maka-keep up. There are just not enough takers. What else can we be looking at to consider to encourage more people to take on, obviously, in helping out sa front lines?
So medyo malaking system overhaul talaga, Rob, no? Kung sinasabi natin na karamihan ng mga tao hindi naman kailangan na sa ospital, syempre kung merong facility either in the community or in their homes if they're really asymptomatic, and merong magiging reliable system doon pa lang sa area na yon, hindi mo na kailangan dalhin sa ospital kasi last line na nga yun eh, hindi nga siya front line, right? So ano naman ang gagawin doon sa front line, the community-based centers? You don't actually need a lot of people there. You don't need very skilled people there, in fact, no? Somebody with very basic healthcare knowledge, maybe even the BHERTs, no? All you really need to do is to collate all of the vital signs of these persons, maybe make a tabulation, look at who are requiring more urgent care, then transfer them. But everybody else stays there. So parang it's just containment and then identifying kung sino yung may mga issues, then ililipat mo dun sa higher level of care. So parang doable naman, di ba?
Tanong ko lang, in relation to that, kanina si Claire de la Fuente namatay daw eh. Sabi nung anak niya, nagpa-interview, we're not sure how accurate because he's also in isolation. Sabi niya yung mother daw niya, hindi pa na-admit dun sa isang hospital for 1 week, kaya napilitang ilipat in another hospital where hindi pa rin siya ma-admit until she had her heart attack and she died in the emergency room. Ano kaya yung naging, would the failure to admit her, or meron bang ganong failure? Is someone not admitted into a hospital or pinaghintay siya sa labas ng hospital or what? Tama ba yun?
Well, kung nasa ospital ka na kasi, even if you say you're just in the emergency room, parang ganon, in quote-unquote, at least that's still medical attention, no? I think the people in those areas, they try their best, but if the capacity is too much, you can expect that the care will be compromised. So kaya nga ang gusto sana namin as healthcare professionals is unang-una, no? Yung mga hindi dapat nasa ospital, wala sa ospital, para matutukan namin yung mga kailangan nandoon. Otherwise, talagang magsasuffer. And we're talking about somebody with COVID who died of something else, di ba? Not of COVID. Kung tama nga yung na-relay sa ating information, this person died of a heart attack. And this is something that's playing out very often in our current system. Maraming hindi COVID ang kinamamatay and yet cannot access healthcare because the entire system is just so full from the burden of COVID.
She was admitted daw for COVID for 1 week. Kaya lang, wala pa daw
Right.
capacity yung hospital. But anyway, tumataas pa rin yung mga ano natin, no? Mga cases natin. It's still pretty high, 9,000, over 9,000 plus. Although nag-slow down ng konti. Kumusta yung situation ng variants natin? Do you still think this is mainly driven by lax compliance with protocols? Or talagang malaki na ang role ng variants dito sa nangyayari ngayon?
Yung kasing, when we talk about malaki ang role ng variants, that would translate to seeing, for example, maybe 50% or 60% or 70% of your isolates being made out of variants. And that's not the case, sa totoo lang. Parang mababa siya eh. Hindi nga umaabot ng 10% sa ngayon, no? Pero undeniably, kahit konti lang yan, yung velocity nung pagdami ng kaso, hindi katulad nung dati. Diba? So, hindi mo matatanggal na may impact siya. Pero, hindi rin pwedeng sabihin na siya lang ang pinagmumulan. I think siguro one of the things we have to think about is ngayon yung mga reports, diba, clusters in the household. Hindi na lang isang tao sa isang pamilya nagkakasakit, buong pamilya. So, anong ibig sabihin nun? Siguro kung ano man yung dala-dala ng taong yun sa bahay, mas madali siyang kumalat, mas nakakahawa. Tapos, paano naman siya nahawa? Di yung pagkilos niya siguro sa labas, naging source din ng pagkakahawa niya para dali niya sa bahay. So, two factors, di ba? Yung the fact na hindi napakinabangan ng husto yung sariling proteksyon, and then the fact na nadala niya sa bahay yung sakit, kaya kumalat din doon, mas nakakahawa kasi. So all of these coming together, perfect storm of what we're actually seeing now.
Pero how many of the infections are we testing sa Genome Center? Sila yung magsasabi if it's because of the if there are variant cases, di ba?
That's
So
right.
mga halimbawa, 9,000 a day, 10,000 kahapon, ilan doon yung natetesting by the genome to determine kung yun yung variant?
Okay. So that's a very good question kasi obviously we cannot test 9,000
Yes.
samples, right? So what has been done is a sampling framework to try to get representative numbers across different areas. So each run is about 750 samples. Then you distribute it depending on the number of cases per area so that what you get is representative of whatever it is you're running. So we don't have each and every sequence, but we have an idea of how much it has spread based on that sampling framework.
Excuse me.
Okay.
Ma'am, still on the variants, how infectious, or well, let me put it this way, how do we describe this so-called P3 variant that they supposedly found in the Philippines? Kasi nagka-COVID briefing daw kami dun sa District 6 sa Quezon City, and the P3 variant was described as extremely contagious. I don't know na kung sino nagbigay ng briefing pero supposedly it was described as extremely contagious. Just for clarification, what do we know about P3?
So, the mutations in the P3 variant are also found. Some of them are also found in the UK variant and in the South African variant. And perhaps that's what is being quoted as the basis for saying it's more contagious, etc., etc. But the problem is we have not actually observed the behaviors of this P3 variant to be described as such. Meron kasi siyang qualities in the sequence, but So that's the genotype, meaning parang kung ano yung characteristics niya based on the genetic code. But the phenotype, the way it's expressing itself, the way it's behaving in the field, that one still has to be observed. And we're not yet sure whether those things exactly match. But having said that, because they do have the characteristics that are found also in the UK variant and the South African variant, dapat mag-ingat. Kasi bakit naman natin bakit tayo magbabaka sakali kung pwede naman tayong mag-ingat, di ba?
But this is not in any way similar to the P1 variant found in Manaus, Brazil.
Well, you know about that lineage thing? Parang kumbaga
Yes,
common ancestor and
Opo,
then
opo.
eventually they
Kumbaga
diverged
sa
into
sanga.
something else.
Opo.
That's right.
But we're not looking at the same characteristics that makes P1 sound so terrible, yung vaccine escape and yung reinfection and increased transmissibility. We're not yet looking at that.
We don't have
Or
the
no data yan.
information. Oo. Bali, this has to be observed. And basically, we need to look at what's happening in Region 7 kasi doon halos nakita yun di ba?
Yeah.
And maybe eventually to make some conclusions based on our observations on what's happening in Region 7.
Okay. Well, ma'am, sorry, pinigaan namin kayo.
Sure.
Ang dami namin natanong sa inyo. Okay. Maraming salamat, Dr. Ana Ong Lim ng DOH Technical Advisory Group at ng Vaccine Study Group. I'm sorry, Variant Study Group,
Yes.
if I got it right. Maraming
That's right.
salamat, Dr. Lim. Thank you for
Thank
joining
you.
us.
Salamat
Po.
po.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
And that'll be all for this Tuesday edition of the Chiefs. Isang araw na lang.
Oo nga.
Wednesday na. We hope to discuss here. Hindi, kasi after Wednesday, baka hindi alam ng mga tao, after Wednesday, I think we're going off into we'll be praying. Yun. So we hope to discuss. We'll keep the conversation going. Remember, mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. I'm Edwin Gao.
I'm Mami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Bobby Alampay, and we are One News.